expect them to act with honour and...
Well, speak it.
Bale.
Una. No te líes.
But I consider the matter urgent.
What matter?
If Daemon were to remain the uncontested motto,
I named Daemon Master of Laws. My brother would murder me. Take my crown.
The king's firstborn child. I'm sorry, Your Grace, but that is the truth. He'll be...
Most people talk about House of the Dragon like it's simply the story of a family fighting over a throne. But the full series is darker than that. It's really about what happens when a dynasty becomes so powerful that it forgets power still needs trust to survive. The Targaryens have dragons. They have ancient blood. They have the Iron Throne. They have the kind of mythology that makes ordinary people look at them almost like gods. And somehow, that still isn't enough. Because House of the Dragon is not about a weak house being destroyed by enemies from the outside. It's about the strongest family in Westeros turning inward, slowly convincing itself that love, duty, marriage, inheritance, and even children can all become weapons. That is what makes the series so tragic. We already know, from Game of Thrones, that the Targaryens will eventually fall. We know their dragons will vanish from the world for generations. We know their name will become both legend and warning. But House of the Dragon takes us back to the moment when the disaster was still avoidable, not easy to avoid, not simple, but possible, and that's the painful part. The show begins almost 200 years before Daenerys Targaryen is born, at a time when House Targaryen is still at the height of its power. The realm is not perfect, but it is stable. King Viserys Targaryen sits on the Iron Throne, and unlike many rulers in Westeros, Viserys is not cruel by nature. He isn't a monster. He isn't hungry for war. He doesn't dream of conquest. In many ways, he wants the simplest thing a king can want. He wants peace. But House of the Dragon understands something important about peaceful rulers. Peace is not the same as strength, and kindness, when it avoids hard decisions, can become its own kind of danger. Viserys inherits a throne already shaped by a wound. Before his reign begins, the question of succession is settled through a great council at Harrenhal. The realm chooses Viserys over Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, even though Rhaenys has a powerful claim. The official logic is political stability. The deeper message is much clearer. Westeros would rather bend the rules for a man than accept a woman as ruler. That decision hangs over the entire show like smoke before a fire. Rhaenys becomes known as the queen who never was. It sounds almost poetic, but it is really a political scar. She is living proof that blood alone does not decide power. Law does not fully decide power either. What decides power is what the realm is willing to accept. And years later, that same question returns through Viserys' daughter, Princess Rhaenyra. At first, Rhaenyra is not treated like the future of the kingdom. She is young, sharp, proud, and restless. She is close to her father, but she also understands the limits placed around her. She can ride a dragon. She can speak High Valyrian. She carries the blood of old Valyria. But in the eyes of many lords, she is still a daughter in a world built for sons. Viserys, meanwhile, is desperate for a male heir. His wife, Queen Aemond, has suffered through pregnancies, losses, and pain because the kingdom expects a king to produce a son. The show makes this expectation feel brutal, not just politically, but physically. The royal body is not private. Aemond's suffering is treated as part of the machinery of succession, and then comes the first major tragedy. During childbirth, Viserys is forced into a horrific choice. The baby may be saved, but Aemond will almost certainly die. He chooses the child, hoping for the son he has wanted for so long, but the son dies too. In one moment, Viserys loses his wife, loses the male heir, and loses the illusion that the throne can be protected without sacrifice. This is where House of the Dragon makes its first quiet accusation. The Dance of the Dragons does not begin with swords drawn or dragons burning armies. It begins in a birthing bed. It begins with a system that turns women into vessels for inheritance, then acts surprised when the people crushed by that system start pushing back against it. After Aemond's death, Viserys makes a decision that seems bold. He names Rhaenyra his heir. On the surface, this is a loving father recognizing his daughter. Politically, it is much bigger. Viserys is asking the realm to accept something it has already rejected once with Rhaenys. He gathers the lords of Westeros and makes them swear loyalty to Rhaenyra as the future queen. For a moment, it looks like history might change. But the show is careful. It doesn't present this oath as a clean victory. It presents it as a promise made in a room full of men who may not believe it when it becomes inconvenient. And that is the first big hidden danger in the series. Viserys thinks naming Rhaenyra is enough. He thinks a public oath can settle the future, but he does not rebuild the political world around that decision. He does not remove the people who oppose it. He does not prepare the court to support her rule. He does not fully confront the fact that every future son born into the family will become a living threat to her claim. Instead, he hopes love and loyalty will do the work. They won't. Rhaenyra's closest companion in these early years is Alicent Hightower, daughter of Otto Hightower, the Hand of the King. Their friendship is one of the emotional engines of the entire story. Before they become symbols of rival factions, they are two girls trapped inside a system older and colder than either of them. Rhaenyra wants freedom. Alicent wants safety. Rhaenyra pushes against the rules because she has royal blood and a dragon beneath her. Alicent survives by obeying the rules because obedience is the only protection she has been taught. That difference matters more with every episode. Otto Hightower sees the future faster than almost anyone. After Queen Aemma dies, he sends Alicent to comfort the grieving king. On the surface, it is gentle, a kind daughter visiting a lonely widower. But politically, it is a move. Otto understands that closeness to the king can become power, and if Alicent becomes queen, House Hightower will stand beside the throne. The disturbing part is that Alicent is not really choosing this path. She is being placed on it. When Viserys decides to marry Alicent, the emotional damage is immediate. Rhaenyra feels betrayed by her best friend and by her father. Alicent becomes queen, but her promotion is also a kind of imprisonment. She gains status, yet loses the last part of her childhood, and from this point on, the court begins dividing into invisible sides long before anyone says the words black and green. This is one of the reasons House of the Dragon works so well as a political tragedy. Nobody needs to wake up one morning and decide to destroy the family. The structure does it for them. Every marriage creates suspicion. Every child creates a claim. Every silence becomes evidence. Then there is Daemon Targaryen. Daemon is Viserys' younger brother, and he enters the story like a man who wants everyone to believe he doesn't care about being loved. He is violent, charismatic, reckless, and deeply proud of his Targaryen identity. Matt Smith plays him with a dangerous mix of arrogance and wounded loyalty, so the audience is never allowed to reduce him to one simple label. Daemon loves his family, but he also threatens it. He wants recognition, but he rejects discipline. He sees weakness in Viserys, yet he still craves his brother's approval. And with Rhaenyra, his connection is even more complicated. He sees her as a reflection of old Targaryen fire, someone less afraid than the people around her. But that fascination carries danger from the beginning. Daemon's early conflict with Otto is not just personal, it represents two different visions of power. Otto believes in institutions, patience, influence, and control. Daemon believes in blood, dragons, fear, and action. Viserys sits between them, trying to keep both forces from tearing his reign apart. But again, Viserys avoids final decisions. He removes Daemon, then forgives him. He distrusts Otto, then depends on him. He names Rhaenyra heir, then remarries and produces sons. Every compromise buys temporary peace while making the final explosion worse. The Stepstone storyline shows this clearly. Daemon joins Corlys Velaryon in war against the crab feeder, partly because the crown is too slow to act. Corlys is another key figure in the series because House Velaryon is rich, proud, ancient, and tied closely to the Targaryens through Valyrian blood. Corlys wants legacy. He wants his house remembered not as a servant to the Dragon Kings, but as a power beside them. His wife, Rhaenys, understands the danger of ambition better than he does. She has already been denied the throne. She knows how the realm works. She knows how men talk about order while protecting their own advantage. But Corlys still believes history can be forced open with the right marriage, the right alliance, the right war. The Stepstones War gives Daemon a battlefield where he can become a hero without becoming stable. He wins glory, but glory does not solve the succession crisis. It only makes him more dangerous because now he has proof that he can do what Viserys hesitates to do. Meanwhile, Rhaenyra is growing into the role her father gave her but never fully secured. She is named heir, yet constantly reminded that her position depends on male approval. When Viserys and Alicent have a son, Aegon, the court immediately begins whispering about the obvious alternative. This is the contradiction at the heart of Season 1. Rhaenyra is the official heir, Aegon is the expected heir, and Westeros is very good at pretending those two things can coexist. Rhaenyra's marriage becomes the next political battlefield. She cannot simply marry for love because her body and her children are now part of the state. The chosen match is Laenor Velaryon, son of Corlys and Rhaenys. Politically, it is brilliant. It unites two powerful Valyrian houses, repairs old wounds, and strengthens Rhaenyra's claim. Personally, it is much more complicated. Laenor is honorable in many ways, but his desires do not fit the role expected of him. Rhaenyra and Laenor make an arrangement, trying to perform duty while preserving some private freedom. It is one of those choices that feels practical in the moment, but in Westeros, private arrangements can become public weapons. Because when Rhaenyra has children, the court notices what everyone is not supposed to say out loud. Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey are officially Valyrian princes, but their appearance strongly suggests that their biological father is Harwin Strong. Everyone can see it, almost nobody can safely say it, and that silence becomes a poison. This is where Alicent's transformation hardens. For years, she has done what was asked of her. She married the king. She bore his children. She followed duty. She endured loneliness, pressure, and fear. From her point of view, Rhaenyra breaks the rules and still expects protection. Rhaenyra gets to be heir, gets to choose pleasure, gets to hide scandal, and still expects Alicent to accept it. But from Rhaenyra's point of view, Alicent has become the face of the system that trapped them both. Alicent married her father. Alicent produced rival heirs. Alicent stands with Otto's politics and the court's judgment. What began as friendship becomes resentment, then suspicion, then open hostility. The show's smartest move is that both women have reasons to feel betrayed. That does not make them equally responsible for everything that follows, but it does make the tragedy stronger. House of the Dragon is not asking us to choose the nice side and the evil side. It is showing how two girls were shaped into rival queens by fathers, husbands, laws, and fears they did not create. And then the series gives us one of its most important time jumps. Years pass. The younger versions of Rhaenyra and Alicent give way to adult versions, and the emotional temperature changes. This is not childhood conflict anymore. Now there are children involved, claims involved, rumors hardened into political realities. The friendship that might once have been repaired has become a public war of posture and symbolism. Rhaenyra is played as someone carrying the exhaustion of being doubted for years. Alicent is played as someone carrying the bitterness of duty without reward. Neither woman can easily step backward, because stepping backward would mean admitting that years of pain were avoidable, and that is one of the deepest horrors of the show. By the time peace is still technically possible, too many people have built their identities around the conflict. By the middle of Season 1, House of the Dragon stops being only a story about succession on paper. It becomes a story about children inheriting adult hatred before they're old enough to understand the full cost. That is where the tragedy sharpens. Rhaenyra's sons, Jacaerys and Lucerys especially, grow up under a cloud of accusation. Officially, they are Velaryons. They are the children of Princess Rhaenyra and Laenor Velaryon. They are dragon riders, royal heirs, and central pieces in the future of the realm. But everyone at court can see the truth the family refuses to name. They do not look like Laenor. They do not look like Corlys. They do not look like the old Valyrian image of silver hair and sharp dragonlord beauty that House Targaryen and House Velaryon use as political branding. Instead, they look like Harwin Strong. And because this is Westeros, biology is never just biology. Their appearance becomes a political weapon. It gives the Greens a way to attack Rhaenyra without attacking the king directly. It allows Alicent to frame Rhaenyra's claim as not only dangerous, but dishonest. It creates doubt around Jacaerys as Rhaenyra's successor, because if his legitimacy can be questioned, then her entire future line can be questioned too. But here's what makes the situation so tense. Viserys knows, or at least he knows enough. He can see what everyone else sees. He hears the whispers. He understands the implications. But he refuses to let the court turn those whispers into official truth. For Viserys, protecting Rhaenyra's children is part love, part denial, and part political survival. If he admits the boys are illegitimate, then he does not just weaken Rhaenyra. He exposes the entire succession settlement as fragile, so he chooses the version of reality that keeps the peace. And again, House of the Dragon asks a brutal question. Is Viserys protecting his family, or is he delaying the disaster until it becomes impossible to stop? The answer is both. Alicent's children grow up inside the same pressure chamber. Aegon, Rhaenyra, and Aemond are not just siblings. They are rival possibilities. Their very existence creates an alternative line, whether they ask for it or not. Aegon in particular is treated by Otto and many Green supporters as the son who should naturally replace Viserys. Even though Viserys has never changed his named heir, Aegon does not begin as a noble challenger with a grand vision for the realm. He is careless, indulgent, resentful, and deeply uncomfortable with the destiny being pushed onto him. That matters because House of the Dragon does not make the Green claim powerful because Aegon is impressive. The Green claim is powerful because many people want a male heir, even if the man himself is unworthy. That is one of the show's coldest political ideas. Systems do not always elevate the best person. Often, they elevate the person who makes the system feel safe. Aemond is different. As a child, he carries humiliation like a wound. He is the son without a dragon in a family where dragons are identity, status, and power. For ordinary children, being mocked by cousins might fade with time. For a Targaryen prince, being dragonless is almost a public failure of blood. And this leads to one of the most important sequences in the entire series. The night on Driftmark. Rhaenyra Velaryon dies after choosing a dragon rider's death, commanding Vhagar to burn her rather than die powerless in childbirth. That moment is short, but it echoes the series' opening tragedy with Aemma. Again, the show ties women's bodies, childbirth, agency, and death together. But Rhaenyra's choice is different because she takes control of her final moment. In a world that so often takes choice away from women, she claims one terrible decision for herself. Her funeral brings the broken branches of the family together at Driftmark, and funerals in Westeros are rarely just funerals. They are political gatherings with grief sitting beside ambition. Rhaenyra is there with her children. Daemon is there, grieving Rhaenyra in his own strange, distant way. Alicent is there with her children. Viserys is there, visibly decaying, still hoping the family can behave like a family for one more day. Corlys and Rhaenys are mourning their daughter while also watching their house's future become more unstable. Then Aemond finds Vhagar. This is a massive turning point because Vhagar is not just any dragon. She is one of the oldest and most powerful dragons alive, a living connection to Aegon's conquest itself. For Aemond, claiming Vhagar is not only about getting a dragon. It is about rewriting how everyone sees him. The mocked child becomes the rider of the greatest weapon in the world, but power taken in one moment can create violence in the next. Rhaenyra's daughters feel robbed because Vhagar had been their mother's dragon. Rhaenyra's sons become involved. The confrontation between children escalates with terrifying speed. Insults turn to punches. Grief turns to rage. Aemond calls Rhaenyra's sons strong, using the accusation everyone knows but cannot safely say. Then Lucerys slashes Aemond's eye. On paper, this is a childhood fight gone horribly wrong. In reality, it is the civil war in miniature. Aemond loses an eye but gains Vhagar. Lucerys defends his brother but marks himself forever as Aemond's enemy. Alicent sees her son maimed and believes the king still protects Rhaenyra's side above her own children. Rhaenyra sees the accusation of bastardy spoken openly and understands that her sons will never be safe if the Greens gain power. And Viserys once again tries to force peace through command. He demands that the family stop fighting. He demands that the matter end. He wants the truth buried, the children reconciled, the adults controlled. But the room has already changed. Alicent grabs the catspaw dagger and moves against Rhaenyra. That single action is one of the clearest visual breaks in the season. The queen, who has built her identity around restraint and duty, finally snaps in front of the court. She wants justice for Aemond. She wants Lucerys punished. She wants the king to acknowledge the pain on her side of the family. But because Viserys will not give her that justice, she reaches for it herself. When Rhaenyra tells her, "Now they see you as you are," the line cuts both ways. Rhaenyra means that Alicent's righteousness has cracked, exposing anger and ambition underneath. But Alicent could say the same thing back. Rhaenyra's protected position, her secrets, and her father's favoritism are also visible. From this moment, the old friendship is almost impossible to recover. And then House of the Dragon makes a bold structural move. It removes Laenor from the board without killing him in the way the court believes. Rhaenyra and Daemon arrange a deception that lets Laenor escape across the sea with Qarl, while the world believes he has died. Politically, this frees Rhaenyra to marry Daemon. Morally, it shows how far she is willing to go to strengthen her claim. She does not murder Laenor, which keeps the act from becoming as dark as it first appears, but she still allows his parents to believe they have lost another child. That choice matters. Corlys and Rhaenys have already lost Laena. Now they believe Laenor is gone too. Rhaenyra gains a powerful husband, but the price is another wound inside House Velaryon. This is how the show builds tragedy. Not always through clean villainy, but through political choices that solve one problem by creating grief somewhere else. Rhaenyra and Daemon's marriage is both romantic and strategic, both empowering and dangerous. For Rhaenyra, Daemon represents protection. He is the one man in her family who is not afraid of conflict. He understands dragons, power, and intimidation. He makes her claim harder to challenge, but he also brings unpredictability. Daemon is never just a shield. He is a blade, and blades cut in more than one direction. For Daemon, Rhaenyra is desire, legacy, and access to the future of House Targaryen. Their bond is intense because it feels like two people choosing the old fire over the careful politics of the court. But the show never lets us forget the imbalance and history between them. Their relationship carries attraction, ambition, family trauma, and power all at once. Years later, when Viserys is almost unrecognizable from illness, the succession crisis reaches its final stage before open war. The king's body has become a symbol of the kingdom. He is decaying while the realm pretends stability remains. His face is damaged. His strength is gone. His court has slowly been captured by people preparing for the moment after his death. The throne still belongs to him, but the future is already being divided in whispers. Otto Hightower returns as Hand. Alicent has grown more religious, more politically hardened, and more convinced that her children are in danger. The Green faction becomes more organized. Rhaenyra spends more time away from King's Landing on Dragonstone, which protects her family in the short term but weakens her day-to-day presence at court. This is a key mistake, and the show knows it. Rhaenyra is the named heir, but she is not controlling the center of power. The Greens are. They sit near the king. They manage access. They shape procedure. They prepare the machinery of rule. By the time Viserys dies, they do not need to invent power from nothing. They already have their hands on it. The dispute over Driftmark's succession brings everyone back together. Vaemond Valerion challenges Lucerys's claim to Driftmark using the same truth everyone has been forced to ignore. He wants the seat to pass through true Valerion blood, not through a boy he believes is illegitimate. From his point of view, this is about preserving his house. From Rhaenyra's point of view, it is an attack on her children and her future. The throne room scene that follows is one of the most powerful in the series because Viserys makes one last impossible effort. He drags his failing body to the Iron Throne. Every step looks painful. Every breath feels like it could be his last. But for once, his love becomes action. He does not send a message. He does not ask someone else to speak for him. He physically appears, wearing the crown, to defend Rhaenyra and her son's claim. And when Daemon helps him onto the throne, the moment says more than dialogue could. These brothers have hurt each other, misunderstood each other, and disappointed each other for years. But in this final public act, Daemon recognizes the king his brother is still trying to be. Viserys confirms Lucerys as heir to Driftmark. Vaemond says the forbidden truth aloud and insults Rhaenyra. Daemon kills him almost instantly. It is shocking, but it also reveals the difference between Viserys's world and the world that is coming. Viserys wants words to restore order. Daemon understands that, once the taboo is broken in public, violence will answer. That night, Viserys gathers the family for a final dinner. This scene is heartbreaking because for a brief moment, the show lets us see the version of the family that might have existed. Viserys removes his mask, literally exposing the ruined body he has been hiding, and begs them to see him not only as king but as father, husband, and kin. He wants peace not as policy, but as his last wish. And strangely, it almost works. Rhaenyra thanks Alicent for standing by Viserys. Alicent acknowledges that Rhaenyra will make a good queen. The children still carry tension, especially Aemond, but the adults seem close to something like reconciliation. For a few minutes, the audience is allowed to feel the tragedy of possibility, because if Viserys had lived longer, or if he had spoken more clearly, or if the family had been separated before the old wounds reopened, maybe the first moves of war could have been delayed. But House of the Dragon is built on moments that almost save everyone. Aemond's toast reignites the conflict. He calls Rhaenyra's son strong again, hiding the insult inside politeness. Jace reacts, the boys clash, the mask of peace slips. Viserys is carried away, and the family's last dinner becomes not reconciliation, but the final illusion before collapse. Then comes the misunderstanding that changes history. As Viserys lies dying, Alicent sits beside him. He speaks of Aegon's dream, the prophecy passed from king to heir about the threat from the north and the need for a Targaryen on the Iron Throne. But Alicent does not have the full context. She hears him mention Aegon and believes he means their son, Aegon. She interprets his dying words as a reversal of the succession. This is one of the most debated choices in the show because it adds tragic misunderstanding to political ambition. But it does not mean the green coup happens only because Alicent misunderstands. That would be too simple. Otto and the council are already prepared to move. Many of them have been planning to crown Aegon regardless of Viserys's wishes. Alicent's interpretation gives her personal and moral permission, but the political machine was already loaded. That distinction is important. Alicent may believe she is honoring Viserys. Otto knows he is overturning Viserys. The council knows what it is doing. The realm is not sliding into war by accident. The misunderstanding is the spark, not the fuel. When Viserys dies, the man who spent his reign trying to keep the family together leaves behind the exact conditions for it to destroy itself. The Greens move quickly. They lock down the Red Keep. They keep Viserys's death secret. They search for Aegon, who does not even want the crown at first. They pressure lords to swear loyalty. Those who refuse face imprisonment or death. The succession becomes not a public debate, but a controlled seizure of power. Alicent is disturbed by some of the violence, especially Otto's willingness to eliminate Rhaenyra. This matters because even now, Alicent is not simply hungry for blood. She wants her son crowned, but she also wants to believe there is still a moral boundary. Otto is colder. He knows that as long as Rhaenyra lives, Aegon's reign is vulnerable. This difference between Alicent and Otto becomes more important later. Alicent wants legitimacy without full brutality. Otto understands that coups rarely stay clean. Aegon is crowned in the dragon pit before the people of King's Landing. The ceremony is designed to create public reality. Once the crowd sees him wearing the crown, once the symbols are placed around him, once the swords are raised, the Greens can say the realm has a king. But then Rhaenys changes the meaning of the moment. She escapes confinement and bursts through the floor on Meleys, her dragon. For one breathtaking moment, she has the entire Green leadership in front of her. Alicent, Aegon, Otto, Aemond, all of them are exposed, and she does not burn them. This decision has been argued about by viewers, but inside the story, it fits Rhaenys perfectly. She is not a mass murderer. She is not yet willing to begin kinslaying in that way. She knows the horror that would follow. She also understands the power of restraint, even if restraint will later cost her side dearly. Instead, she sends a message. The Greens may have staged a coronation, but the dragons are not all theirs. The queen who never was has not forgotten what stolen succession looks like. When Rhaenys reaches Dragonstone and tells Rhaenyra what has happened, the series crosses its true point of no return. Rhaenyra loses her father and her throne in the same blow. She goes into premature labor, and the birth is traumatic, ending in the death of her daughter Visenya. Again, the series returns to childbirth at the exact moment politics turns violent. The war for succession is written through women's bodies before it is written across battlefields. Daemon wants immediate war. Rhaenyra hesitates. This is crucial to her character. Despite everything, she does not want to burn the realm if she can avoid it. She understands that dragons make war catastrophic. A conflict between armies is one thing. A conflict between dragon riders can destroy castles, towns, bloodlines, and the idea of Targaryen invincibility itself. Rhaenyra is crowned on Dragonstone using her father's crown, brought by Sir Eric Cargill. The symbolism is clear. She represents continuity with Viserys' declared will. Aegon has the public coronation in King's Landing. Rhaenyra has the named succession and the old oath. Two monarchs now exist, and Westeros cannot survive both. The Season 1 finale turns on the mission to Storm's End. Rhaenyra sends her sons as envoys, not warriors. Jacaerys goes north. Lucerys goes to Boros Baratheon. The idea is to remind old houses of the oaths sworn to Rhaenyra. But again, the show exposes the weakness of oaths when power changes. Boros is not moved by memory. He wants terms. He wants advantage. Aemond is already there, offering a marriage pact. Lucerys arrives as a messenger and finds himself facing the boy whose eye he took, now grown into a terrifying young man with the largest dragon alive. The scene at Storm's End is built around dread. Aemond demands an eye. Boros stops bloodshed under his roof, but once Lucerys leaves, the sky belongs to dragons. The chase between Arrax and Vhagar is one of the most important moments in House of the Dragon because it shows how human hatred becomes uncontrollable once dragons are involved. Aemond wants to frighten Lucerys. He wants revenge, humiliation, dominance, but he does not seem to intend murder in that exact moment. Then Arrax panics and attacks Vhagar with fire. Vhagar responds like the ancient war beast she is. Aemond loses control. Lucerys and Arrax are killed, and the look on Aemond's face tells us everything. He has crossed a line he cannot uncross. Whether he meant to or not, he has killed Rhaenyra's son. The war is no longer about documents, oaths, rumors, or crowns. It is blood for blood now. When Rhaenyra receives the news, she turns toward the camera in silence. No speech is needed. The mother who tried to avoid open war is gone, or at least she is buried under grief. That final look is the real beginning of the Dance of the Dragons. Season 2 begins in the shadow of Lucerys Velaryon's death, and the first thing House of the Dragon makes clear is that grief does not arrive neatly. It spreads. Lucerys was not a king. He was not a general. He was not the most powerful dragon rider in the realm, but his death changes everything because he was Rhaenyra's son and because he died during a mission that was supposed to avoid bloodshed. He was sent as an envoy. He carried words, not war. Aemond's mistake turns diplomacy into murder, and now both sides have to live inside the consequences. On Dragonstone, Rhaenyra is almost silent at first. That silence is more frightening than rage because it shows a queen being hollowed out before she chooses what to become next. She searches for what remains of Luke and Arax. She finds proof of the death. And when she returns, her grief finally takes shape in one sentence. She wants Daemon Targaryen. That desire is understandable. It is a mother's pain focused into a demand. But in this world, a queen's grief does not stay private. The moment Rhaenyra names what she wants, other people begin turning it into action, interpretation, and strategy. Daemon hears vengeance, and Daemon is very good at turning emotion into violence. This is one of the key tensions between Rhaenyra and Daemon in Season 2. They are on the same side, but they are not always fighting the same war. Rhaenyra is trying to protect her claim, avenge her son, and avoid becoming the kind of ruler who burns the realm just because she can. Daemon sees hesitation as weakness. He sees enemies as problems to be removed. He believes fear is a language the Greens understand. So when he arranges retaliation through blood and cheese, the war becomes even uglier. The target is supposed to be Aemond, but the attack does not reach Aemond. Instead, it enters the private rooms of the Red Keep where Queen Helaena is with her children. What follows is one of the most horrifying turns in the story: the murder of young Prince Jacaerys, Aegon and Helaena's son. This is the nightmare logic of revenge. Rhaenyra loses a son. The Blacks try to answer, but the answer does not restore balance. It kills a child who had no part in the crime. It gives the Greens a martyr. It stains Rhaenyra's cause even if she did not order that specific horror. And it proves that once war begins moving through proxies, assassins, rumors, and fear, nobody can fully control where the blade lands. The murder of Jacaerys also changes how the Greens present themselves to the realm. Otto Hightower immediately understands the political value of the tragedy. This does not mean he does not feel the horror of it, but Otto is a strategist before he is anything else, and he sees that the murdered child can become a symbol. If the people see the body, if they see the grieving mother, if they hear that Rhaenyra's side is responsible, then the Greens can define the Blacks as monsters before the Blacks define themselves as rightful rulers. This is why the funeral procession matters. It is not only mourning, it is public messaging. Alicent and Helaena are placed inside grief that also functions as theater. Helaena, who has always seemed emotionally distant from court politics, is suddenly forced into the center of its most brutal performance. She is not built for this world. Her strange sensitivity, her quiet warnings, her dreamlike way of speaking, all of it makes her feel like someone hearing the future before anyone else understands the words. But none of that protects her. Aegon's reaction is different. He is not a good king, but he is a father whose son has been murdered. His grief becomes rage. His rage becomes a desire to prove strength, and this is exactly where Aegon is most dangerous. Not because he is calculating, but because he is impulsive, insecure, and surrounded by people who either manipulate him or underestimate him. Otto tries to control the message. Aegon wants immediate blood. Criston Cole wants to convert guilt and shame into violence. Aemond carries his own silence because the revenge meant for him has landed on a child. Alicent is trapped between horror, guilt, and the knowledge that the war she feared is now consuming the innocent. And that is the darker rhythm of Season 2. Almost every character believes they are reacting to something done to them, but each reaction becomes the next crime someone else uses as justification. The Blacks say Lucerys was murdered. The Greens say Jacaerys was murdered. Both are true, and truth does not stop escalation. Sometimes it feeds it. On Dragonstone, Rhaenyra understands quickly that blood and cheese damages her claim. She needed the realm to see her as the wronged heir, the queen whose throne was stolen and whose son was killed. Now the Greens can say she is the queen whose faction sends killers into children's rooms. Daemon's usefulness becomes inseparable from his danger. He is a weapon Rhaenyra needs, but he is also a man who may act before she commands. This challenges not only their marriage, but her authority. If Daemon can make decisions that reshape the war without her full control, then what does it mean for her to be queen? Is she ruling, or is she being pulled behind the violence of men who claim to serve her? That question follows her through the season. Rhaenyra's council wants action. The lords around her expect decisiveness. But many of them also treat her restraint as weakness because she is a woman. If a male ruler hesitated before unleashing dragons, he might be called strategic. When Rhaenyra hesitates, they question whether she has the stomach to rule. This double standard is one of the show's most consistent pressures. Rhaenyra is expected to be peaceful enough not to seem monstrous, but violent enough not to seem weak. She is expected to protect the realm, but also prove she deserves power in a way Aegon never has to. Aegon can be crowned despite his obvious flaws because he fits the shape of expectation. Rhaenyra must constantly earn what was already promised to her. Meanwhile, the Greens begin cracking under the weight of their own victory. Aegon is king, but he does not truly control the realm. Otto thinks in terms of long strategy, alliances, public legitimacy, and careful pressure. Criston Cole thinks in terms of honor, resentment, and direct violence. Aemond thinks like someone who has studied war and power from the edge of humiliation. Alicent thinks she still has moral influence, but discovers that once her son wears the crown, motherhood does not equal control. This is a major shift from Season 1. Before Viserys dies, Alicent is one of the most powerful people at court because she has access to the king and speaks in the language of duty. After Aegon is crowned, the men around him no longer need to pretend her conscience is central. They used her belief, her fear, and her interpretation of Viserys's words. But now that the coup has succeeded, power moves toward those willing to command soldiers. Alicent starts to see the shape of what she helped create. It is not the righteous restoration she wanted. It is a war machine, and Criston Cole's rise shows this clearly. Criston began the series as a knight elevated by Rhaenyra's favor. His personal history with her curdled into bitterness, then devotion to Alicent, then a rigid identity built around shame and revenge. In Season 2, he becomes more than a bodyguard or moral scold. He becomes an active military force for the Greens. But Criston's version of honor is unstable because it is built from denial. He condemns what he cannot face in himself. His relationship with Alicent is full of hypocrisy because both of them are trapped between public virtue and private desire. The show does not present this as romance in a clean way. It presents it as pressure leaking through cracks. And that hypocrisy matters because it weakens their judgment. When people are desperate to see themselves as righteous, they often become more dangerous than people who admit they want power. The war outside the capital begins expanding through houses, roads, castles, ravens, and oaths. This is where House of the Dragon becomes larger than a family drama. The civil war pulls the realm into a question many lords would rather avoid. Which oath matters most? The old oath to Rhaenyra or the new reality of Aegon's coronation? Some houses choose principle, some choose advantage, some choose survival, some wait. The Riverlands, the North, the Vale, the Reach, the Westerlands. Every region becomes a board on which the Targaryen family plays with fire. But the tragedy is that the people who will suffer most are not the ones arguing in council chambers. They are small folk, soldiers, servants, farmers, and townspeople whose lives become fuel for royal legitimacy. Season 2 keeps reminding us of this through King's Landing. The people are hungry. They are afraid. They hear rumors. They see symbols. They are told who to mourn and who to hate. At first, the Greens have the advantage of physical control. They have the capital. They have the throne room. They have the public coronation. But ruling a city is not the same as earning love from it. The small folk are not stupid. They understand when food disappears. They understand when royal grief is displayed, while their own pain is ignored. They understand when dragons above them are not protectors, but threats. This becomes increasingly important because Targaryen power depends on awe. The dynasty survives because people believe dragons make the family untouchable. But civil war changes what dragons mean. A dragon defending the realm is one thing. A dragon burning fields, blockading food, or crashing into battle against another dragon is something else. The symbol starts turning against itself. And while the Greens are trying to hold the capital, Daemon goes to Harrenhal. This part of Season 2 is slower, stranger, and more psychological. Harrenhal has always been a place where power feels cursed. It is too large, too ruined, too heavy with old violence. Daemon arrives hoping to claim armies and strengthen Rhaenyra's cause, but the castle becomes a mirror instead of a weapon. He sees visions. He is haunted by guilt, ambition, memory, and the people he has harmed or desired. The show uses Harrenhal to break open a question that has followed Daemon from the beginning. Does he truly serve Rhaenyra, or does he still want the crown's shadow for himself? Daemon has spent his life near power but not fully holding it. Brother to a king, uncle and husband to a queen, rider of Caraxes, prince, warrior, exile, consort. He is always central, yet never the center in the way his ego demands. Harrenhal forces him to sit with that. And because Daemon is usually a man of movement, the stillness becomes unsettling. He cannot simply kill the vision. He cannot intimidate the past. He cannot charm the castle into obedience. The more he tries to act like the old Daemon, the more the story asks whether the old Daemon is useful anymore. At the same time, Rhaenyra is isolated on Dragonstone. This is one of the strongest emotional contrasts of the season. Daemon is away chasing military strength. Rhaenyra is surrounded by advisors who question her. Her children are at risk. Her enemies hold the capital. Her cause has been morally damaged by the death of Jacaerys, and the one force that should give her overwhelming advantage, dragons, is also the force she fears using too quickly, because once the dragons truly enter the war, the dance becomes what history remembers. Not a dispute, not a coup, a catastrophe. That catastrophe begins taking clearer shape as the season moves toward open dragon warfare, and the show starts positioning one question above all others. If both sides have dragons, does anyone really have control? The first half of Season 2 shows both sides trying to shape the war without fully releasing it. The second half shows why that was impossible, because in House of the Dragon, a dragon is not just a larger weapon. It changes the moral scale of every decision. When soldiers fight soldiers, a ruler can still pretend the damage is contained. When dragons enter the field, the war stops being something humans command and becomes something humans survive. That is what Rook's Rest proves. Criston Cole begins his campaign with a clear military purpose. He moves through the Crownlands, taking castles and forcing houses away from Rhaenyra's cause. On one level, this is practical warfare. The Greens need to expand control beyond King's Landing. They need to prove Aegon's crown is not merely symbolic. They need victories that make uncertain lords believe the green side is the winning side. But the campaign also carries a trap. Rook's Rest is held by Lord Staunton, loyal to Rhaenyra. It is not the greatest prize in Westeros, but that is part of the design. If the Blacks respond, they may send a dragon. If they send a dragon, the Greens have a chance to turn the war through ambush. The Blacks face exactly the problem Rhaenyra has feared from the start. If she does not respond to attacks on her allies, her claim looks weak. If she does respond with dragons, she escalates the war. Either choice costs her. Rhaenys volunteers to go. This is one of the most important decisions in the series, because Rhaenys has always understood the political cost of ambition. She was denied the crown, watched the younger generation repeat old mistakes, and carried grief with a colder wisdom than almost anyone around her. She is not naive. She knows this war may devour the family. and still she goes. Part of that is loyalty to Rhaenyra. Part of it is commitment to House Velaryon's place in the conflict. Part of it may be the knowledge that someone has to act while others hesitate. Rhaenys is not fighting because she loves war. She is fighting because the world has reached the point where restraint alone no longer protects anyone. When she arrives on Meleys, the battle changes instantly. To the soldiers below, she is not just a commander entering combat. She is a myth descending on wings. A dragon over a battlefield turns courage into panic. Men can train for swords, shields, arrows, and cavalry. They cannot train their bodies not to fear fire falling from the sky. At first, it looks like the Blacks have answered with overwhelming force. Then Aemond arrives on Vhagar. This is where the trap reveals itself. Vhagar's presence turns Rook's Rest from a battle into a dragon duel. And because Vhagar is so old, so massive, and so destructive, the moment she enters the fight, the audience understands how uneven the scale can be. Meleys is fast, experienced, and formidable, but Vhagar feels like an ancient war engine from another age. Then Aegon appears on Sunfire. This is not part of the clean strategy Otto would have preferred. Aegon enters the battle because his pride has been wounded. He feels dismissed by his council, overshadowed by Aemond, and treated like a crown with a body attached rather than a king with authority. So he tries to prove himself in the most Targaryen way possible. He takes to the sky, but bravery without judgment becomes disaster. The fight at Rook's Rest is tragic because it is not just blacks against greens. It becomes green against green too, because Aemond's choices are impossible to read as simple battlefield necessity. When he attacks in the chaos, Aegon and Sunfire are caught in dragonfire. Whether Aemond is fully trying to kill his brother or simply accepts the chance to remove him from power, the result is the same. Aegon falls. Sunfire is horrifically wounded. The Green King, freshly crowned and desperate to look powerful, is broken by the very war his side unleashed. Rhaenys could flee after seeing how dangerous the fight has become. For a moment, escape seems possible, but she turns back. This is one of those choices that says everything about her character without needing explanation. She knows what Vhagar means. She knows what retreat might mean for Rhaenyra's cause. She knows that if Vhagar remains unchecked, every black ally is vulnerable. So she fights. Meleys and Vhagar clash with a brutality the series has been holding back. This is not elegant fantasy combat. It is animal weight, fire, claws, teeth, screaming, and death. And when Vhagar finally kills Meleys, Rhaenys dies with her dragon. The queen who never was gets one of the most royal deaths in the story. Not because she sits a throne, because she chooses the field. Rook's Rest changes the war in several ways at once. The Greens win tactically because Rhaenys and Meleys are dead, and the Blacks lose one of their most experienced dragon riders. But the Greens also lose the image of stability because Aegon is nearly destroyed. Their king becomes a burned, broken body hidden behind palace doors. And Aemond rises. As Prince Regent, Aemond becomes the kind of ruler many at court once imagined Aegon could never be: disciplined, intelligent, severe, and militarily focused. But that does not make him safe. In some ways, it makes him more frightening. Aegon's danger came from impulse and insecurity. Aemond's danger comes from clarity sharpened by resentment. He has spent years feeling second, mocked, incomplete. Now the crown's power is effectively in his hands. He does not need to wear the crown to control what the crown does. For Alicent, this is devastating. She once feared what would happen to her children if Rhaenyra became queen. But now she has to face what her children are becoming because she helped put them in the center of power. Aegon is ruined. Aemond is colder than ever. Helaena is shattered by grief and trauma. Daeron, mentioned as part of the wider green strength, remains another piece on the board. The family Alicent wanted to protect has become the battlefield, and worse, Alicent's influence continues shrinking. This is one of Season 2's sharpest political reversals. Alicent helped ignite the Green claim through belief, fear, and court maneuvering. But once the war becomes military, the men around her treat her as less useful. Her wisdom, her caution, her guilt, none of it matters much when armies are moving and dragons are burning. The council does not want a mother's grief. It wants command. That realization breaks part of Alicent's identity. She spent years telling herself she had sacrificed for duty, that she had been the responsible one, that she had acted to preserve order. But order is gone. Duty has produced horror, and the sons she raised are either brutalized, brutal, or broken. On Dragonstone, Rhaenyra absorbs Rhaenys' death as both personal loss and strategic disaster. The Blacks have dragons, but not enough riders. This becomes one of the central problems of the season. The Targaryens possess more dragons than they can use. Some dragons are riderless, some are wild, some are dangerous even to approach. A dragon without a rider is power-locked behind death. So Rhaenyra begins looking beyond the traditional limits of royal blood. This is where the dragonseed idea becomes crucial. If people of Targaryen or Valyrian descent outside the main royal line can claim dragons, then Rhaenyra can change the balance of war. But doing that also changes the meaning of Targaryen power. The royal family has built its mystique on blood purity, exclusivity, and the idea that dragons belong to them by divine or ancient right. If bastards, small folk, or forgotten descendants can ride dragons, then the myth cracks. And that crack is both necessary and dangerous. The show introduces Hugh Hammer and Ulf White as part of this wider shift. They are not polished court players. They come from the world beneath royal politics, the world that usually suffers decisions made by people with crowns. Their connection to dragon blood gives them an opening that class and birth would normally deny. Adam of Hull becomes even more important. When Seasmoke chooses Adam, the event carries political shock. It suggests that dragon bonding is not as controllable as the great houses like to pretend. Rhaenyra does not simply assign Seasmoke like a horse or a sword. The dragon chooses. And if a dragon can choose someone outside the accepted royal structure, then the Targaryens are not masters of the myth in the way they claim. Corlys Velaryon's connection to Adam and Alan also deepens the theme of legacy. Corlys has spent the series obsessed with how history will remember his house. But his legitimate line has been damaged by death, secrets, and politics. The sons outside official recognition represent a truth noble houses often hide. Bloodlines are never as clean as the songs say they are. Great men build monuments to legacy while leaving living proof of their private lives in the shadows. Aelin, especially, carries the bitterness of someone close to greatness but denied its name. He has Velaryon blood, he has ability, he has courage, but legitimacy determines what the world allows him to be. That mirrors the larger story of Rhaenyra's sons, Aegon's claim, and the entire war. Again and again, House of the Dragon asks who gets to be recognized and what violence follows when recognition is refused. The sowing of the dragon seeds becomes one of the most visually and thematically powerful developments of Season 2. Rhaenyra opens the possibility of dragon riding to people who would never normally stand near royal destiny. But this is not presented as a clean, inspirational moment. It is terrifying. Many who answer the call are burned, crushed, or destroyed. Dragons are not symbols of empowerment in a simple way. They are ancient predators with minds and instincts of their own. Vermithor's presence makes this especially clear. This dragon is not waiting politely to join a cause. He is immense, violent, and almost godlike in the way he turns human hope into ash. The people who enter that space are not stepping into a tournament. They are stepping into a test where the price of failure is immediate death. When Hugh claims Vermithor and Ulf claim Silverwing, the Blacks suddenly gain what they desperately need: more dragon riders. But the victory contains a future problem. These new riders are not raised inside the same discipline, tradition, and political conditioning as royal Targaryens. They have their own wounds, ambitions, and resentments. By giving them dragons, Rhaenyra elevates them beyond any normal social boundary. How do you command someone who yesterday was nothing to the court and today rides a creature that can burn armies? This is one of the most dangerous bargains Rhaenyra makes. She needs power to survive, but every new source of power brings a new possibility of betrayal, pride, or uncontrollable escalation. Meanwhile, Jacaerys reacts to the dragonseed plan with anxiety that makes complete sense. He is Rhaenyra's heir, but his own legitimacy has always been questioned. If more people with uncertain or unofficial blood can ride dragons, then the very thing that helps his mother's war also weakens one of the best arguments for his future. Dragon riding was supposed to confirm Targaryen identity. Now it might prove that Targaryen identity is wider, messier, and less controllable than anyone admitted. Jace understands the political danger immediately, and his concern reveals that he is growing into a serious player. He is not just Rhaenyra's grieving son, he sees how symbols work. He understands that a war can be won in battle and lost in legitimacy. He knows that if the crown's sacred image breaks too much, ruling after victory may become impossible. That is the trap for the Blacks. To defeat the Greens, they may have to damage the very mythology that makes the throne worth claiming. Back in King's Landing, Aemond sees the new dragon riders as a direct threat. His advantage has always rested heavily on Vhagar. As long as he possesses the largest dragon in the world, he can dominate the strategic imagination of the war. But if Rhaenyra suddenly has multiple active dragons, the balance shifts. Aemond can frighten many enemies. He cannot be everywhere at once. This is why the later part of Season 2 feels like the board expanding and tightening at the same time. More riders, more armies, more resentments, more hunger in the capital, more uncertainty in councils, more prophecy in the background, and more proof that neither side can return to the simpler conflict they thought they were entering. Because the war is no longer just Rhaenyra versus Aegon. It is Rhaenyra versus Aemond, Daemon versus his own ambition, Alicent versus the consequences of her choices, Jace versus the fragility of legitimacy, Corlys versus the truth of legacy, the small folk versus royal indifference, and the dragons versus the illusion that anyone truly controls them. That is why Rook's Rest is not just a battle scene. It is the warning flare for the rest of the series. After Rhaenys falls, the dance of the dragons stops feeling like a coming war and becomes a living disaster. The family has begun feeding itself to its own fire. And the scariest part is that every side still believes victory might justify the cost. By the time Rhaenyra gains new dragon riders, Season 2 has shifted into a more dangerous kind of suspense. The question is no longer whether the war will escalate. It already has. The question now is whether any leader can still shape the escalation before it destroys their own side too. This is where King's Landing becomes one of the most important battlegrounds in the series, even when no army is storming its gates. The capital is not just a seat of government, it is a living pressure chamber. Whoever holds King's Landing holds the Iron Throne, the Red Keep, the royal symbols, the official court, and the appearance of rule. But holding a city full of hungry, frightened people is not the same as controlling it. The Greens discover this the hard way. Rhaenyra's blockade, combined with the wider disruption of war, begins turning the small folk against the rulers who are physically closest to them. For ordinary people, the question of succession is distant. They may hear that Viserys named Rhaenyra. They may hear that Aegon was crowned. They may hear rumors about bastards, prophecies, assassins, and dragons. But hunger is not a rumor. When food becomes scarce, politics becomes personal. The people do not need to understand every legal argument to know their children are starving, while nobles continue speaking in ceremonies and strategy meetings. That gap between royal drama and public suffering becomes one of Season 2's strongest critiques of the entire Targaryen world. The Dragon Lords think in terms of bloodlines. The city thinks in terms of bread, and as conditions worsen, Rhaenyra's side recognizes that public perception can be used as a weapon. Sending food to the small folk is not purely kindness. It is strategy. It tells the people that the queen outside the city understands their pain better than the king inside it. It turns hunger into political communication. This is a clever move because it attacks the Greens at their weakest point. Aegon's side controls the capital, but cannot make the capital feel safe. Aemond can ride Vhagar, Criston Cole can win battles, Otto can craft messages. But none of that fills empty stomachs. And the moment the people begin comparing rulers by survival rather than ceremony, the Green claim becomes vulnerable. The riot in King's Landing shows how quickly royal mystique can collapse. Alicent and Rhaenyra, both already wounded by grief and fear, become exposed to the anger of the crowd. The small folk do not see them as tragic women trapped by the machinery of power. They see symbols of a ruling house that has failed them. Rhaenyra, who is perhaps the least responsible person in the entire royal structure, is still swallowed by public rage because she belongs to the family above the people. That is one of the cruelest truths in the show. In monarchy, innocence does not always protect you from what your name represents. Alicent's horror during this unrest is layered. She sees the danger to Rhaenyra. She sees the hatred of the people. But she also sees, maybe more clearly than ever, that the system she fought to preserve is not loved in the way she imagined. The crown does not automatically command devotion. The Targaryen name does not automatically inspire loyalty. Dragons can terrify a population, but terror is unstable. Given enough hunger and grief, fear can turn into fury. At the same time, Alicent is becoming almost politically homeless. She is a queen dowager, mother of the king, and one of the original moral voices of the Green cause. But by this point, her influence has been hollowed out. Aegon is broken. Aemond rules as regent. Otto is pushed away and then absent from the center of power. Criston has become a military figure shaped by violence and shame. The council no longer treats Alicent as a decisive force. This is not just a personal humiliation. It is the collapse of the story she told herself. For years, Alicent believed she was acting for duty, family, faith, and order. She believed Rhaenyra's freedom was dangerous, that her sons needed protection, that the realm would not accept a queen, that Viserys's last words gave her a sacred responsibility. But now she sees that all of those beliefs have produced a world where her own children are being devoured by power. Aegon wears the crown and is nearly burned to death. Aemond gains command and becomes colder, more isolated, more threatening. Rhaenyra loses a child and retreats further into trauma, and Alicent herself is treated as an inconvenience by the very war party she helped legitimize. This is why her later attempts to step away from power feel so heavy. She is not simply tired. She is confronting the possibility that her sacrifices did not save anyone. They only helped arrange the battlefield. Rhaenyra, meanwhile, is also changing. Earlier, she was defined by restraint. She wanted to avoid dragon war. She wanted to hold to her father's legacy. She wanted to believe that legitimacy, oaths, and careful diplomacy could still matter. But the world keeps punishing restraint. Luke is dead. Jacaerys is dead. Rhaenys is dead. Aegon is broken. The small folk are suffering. The councils are impatient. The dragons are multiplying. Rhaenyra begins to understand that to claim power, she must perform power. This is visible in the way she steps into the dragonseed plan, not just as a desperate tactic, but as something almost religious. The dragonseeds kneel before the possibility of fire, and Rhaenyra stands as the one who can open the path. That image is dangerous because it strengthens her in the moment while feeding the same Targaryen exceptionalism that caused the disaster. The Blacks can say they are fighting for lawful succession. But when Rhaenyra stands before dragons and desperate people seeking transformation through flame, the cause begins to take on a more mythic, almost cult-like edge. She is no longer only Viserys's named heir. She is becoming the center of a new dragon power structure, and the show makes that feel both thrilling and unsettling. Because Rhaenyra is right that she was wronged, but being wronged does not automatically make every later choice safe. Jacaerys sees this danger clearly. His discomfort with the dragonseeds is not just snobbery, though class and legitimacy are definitely part of it. He understands that Rhaenyra is using people whose loyalty has not been tested by years of family bond, political education, or dynastic discipline. Hugh and Ulf may be useful, but they are not simple tools. Once mounted on dragons, they become powers in their own right. Jace also understands the personal threat to his claim. If dragon riding can appear among people outside the accepted royal line, then his own dragon becomes less useful as proof of legitimacy. For a young man already haunted by whispers about his birth, that matters. His entire future depends on people accepting him as Rhaenyra's heir. But the more the war stretches the definition of dragon blood, the more unstable that acceptance might become. This is House of the Dragon at its best. Every solution creates a new wound. The Blacks need more dragon riders to survive Aemond and Vhagar, but recruiting more dragon riders weakens the exclusivity of Targaryen rule. Rhaenyra needs to prove strength, but proving strength may make her look less like the peaceful heir of Viserys and more like another dragon lord willing to gamble lives. Jace needs his mother to win, but some of the methods that help her win may threaten his own future. On the green side, Aemond's regency becomes increasingly severe. He is not careless like Aegon. He does not stumble drunkenly through rule. He studies, plans, commands, and intimidates. Yet his competence does not heal the realm, because competence without empathy can become its own form of tyranny. Aemond believes in strength because weakness defined his childhood. He believes fear works because fear helped him survive humiliation. He believes Vhagar gives him strategic authority because, in practical terms, she does. But ruling through fear narrows the world. It makes honesty dangerous. It turns allies into servants and servants into silent enemies. Even his relationship with Rhaenyra shows the limit of his control. Rhaenyra is not a political operator in the normal sense, but she carries a kind of prophetic sensitivity that unsettles everyone around her. She says things that sound strange, then later feel meaningful. Her grief after Jacaerys' death separates her even more from the ambitions of the people claiming to protect the family. When Aemond tries to pull her closer to the machinery of dragon war, the emotional wrongness is obvious. Rhaenyra is not a weapon, but in this family, anyone with dragon blood can be turned into one. That is the tragedy of the Targaryens. They are born into a mythology that gives them power before it gives them peace. Meanwhile, Daemon's arc at Harrenhal reaches its most important stage. His visions are not random supernatural decoration. They are a psychological trial. Daemon is forced to confront pieces of himself that he has avoided through violence, sex, pride, and movement. He sees reminders of young Rhaenyra, of Viserys, of the throne, of the damage caused by his need to matter. For much of the series, Daemon has been exciting because he refuses restraint. He does what other characters are too afraid to do. He cuts through ceremony. He kills quickly. He speaks with contempt. He rides Caraxes like a living extension of his rage. But Season 2 asks whether that kind of man can actually help build anything. Daemon can destroy enemies. Can he submit to a queen? Daemon can inspire fear. Can he inspire trust? Daemon can claim Harrenhal. Can he conquer himself? That last question becomes central because his loyalty to Rhaenyra has always been tangled with ego. He wants her. He believes in her. But he also resents being secondary, especially when he thinks he understands power better than she does. Harrenhal strips away the glamour of that posture. Inside its haunted walls, Daemon looks less like a rogue prince and more like a man trapped by his own unfinished childhood. The memory of Viserys is especially important. Daemon spent years mocking his brother's weakness, but he also loved him. He wanted recognition from him. He wanted to be trusted. He wanted to be needed. By the time Daemon fully understands parts of that bond, Viserys is gone. This is one of the saddest patterns in the series. Characters often recognize love only after politics has made it useless. Daemon's visions finally push him toward a more meaningful form of loyalty. When he bends the knee to Rhaenyra again, The gesture matters because it is not merely public performance. It signals that he has faced the possibility of claiming power for himself and chosen not to, at least in that moment. For a man like Daemon, that is not a small thing. But the show is not naive. It does not pretend one vision sequence makes him harmless or pure. Daemon is still Daemon. His violence, pride, and unpredictability remain part of him. What changes is his relationship to the larger story. He begins to understand that the war is not simply about his hunger, his grievance, or his old rivalry with the world. Something much larger is moving through the Targaryen line. That larger element is prophecy. Aegon's dream has been present since Season 1, when Viserys told Rhaenyra about the threat from the north and the need for a Targaryen ruler to unite the realm. This prophecy links House of the Dragon to the future events of Game of Thrones. But inside this series, it serves a different function. It shows how rulers use destiny to justify power, and how easily sacred knowledge can become distorted when passed through broken people. Viserys believed the prophecy gave the throne a duty beyond politics. Rhaenyra sees it as part of her responsibility. Alicent misunderstood it in the worst possible moment. Daemon's later exposure to prophetic vision forces him to see the Targaryen story beyond personal ambition. But prophecy does not save the family. In fact, it may help doom them, because people who believe history needs them can become more willing to spill blood in the name of a future they cannot fully understand. This is the danger of destiny in House of the Dragon. It gives meaning to power, but it also excuses power. As Season 2 moves toward its ending, both sides are stronger and weaker than they were before. The Blacks have new dragon riders, Daemon's renewed support, and growing pressure against King's Landing. But they also carry internal doubts, moral stains, and dangerous new allies. The Greens have the capital, Aemond, Vhagar, and the machinery of the throne. But Aegon is broken, the city is unstable, Alicent is disillusioned, and the public image of their rule is cracking. The dance is no longer approaching, it is spreading. And what makes the ending of Season 2 so effective is that it does not resolve the war. It positions the realm on the edge of an even larger disaster. Armies are moving, dragons are claimed, alliances are forming, old characters are changing places on the board. The next stage will not be about whether blood can be avoided. That chance has passed. Now the only question is whose blood the realm will drown in first. To understand why House of the Dragon becomes so powerful across its first 2 seasons, we have to step back from the battles for a moment. Because the series is not only asking who should sit on the Iron Throne, it is asking why the Iron Throne keeps destroying everyone who reaches for it. That question matters because the throne in this story is not just furniture. It is an idea made visible. It is ugly, sharp, dangerous, and impossible to sit comfortably. In Game of Thrones, the Iron Throne represented ambition across the whole realm. In House of the Dragon, it represents something more specific, the Targaryen belief that their blood gives them a special right to rule. That belief is the family's greatest strength, and it is also the poison in their bloodline. The Targaryens have dragons, so they can force the realm to obey. They have Valyrian ancestry, so they see themselves as separate from ordinary houses. They have prophecy, so they can tell themselves their rule is not only political, but necessary. And because all of those things are partly true inside the world of the show, the danger becomes even greater. A lie is easy to reject. A half-truth can build an empire. The Targaryens really are different. Dragons really do change the balance of power. Aegon's dream really does connect their line to a future threat, but none of that makes them immune to jealousy, fear, lust, insecurity, grief, or bad judgment. They are mythic on the outside and painfully human on the inside. That contradiction is the engine of House of the Dragon. Viserys believes in the prophecy and tries to pass it responsibly to Rhaenyra. He wants the throne to mean more than domination. He wants Targaryen rule to serve a future purpose, but he also fails to protect the political structure that would allow Rhaenyra to inherit peacefully. He treats destiny like it can survive without enforcement. Rhaenyra inherits the prophecy as a burden. It gives her claim spiritual weight, but it also traps her inside a dangerous conviction. If she believes she must rule not only because her father named her, but because the realm may one day depend on her bloodline, then surrender becomes more than political defeat. It becomes betrayal of history. That is powerful. It is also terrifying, because once leaders believe the future needs them, compromise becomes harder. Mercy becomes more complicated. Every enemy looks like an obstacle to destiny. Every terrible choice can be framed as necessary. Alicent's misunderstanding of the prophecy is one of the cruelest examples of this. She hears Viserys speak of Aegon and believes he means their son. In that moment, prophecy becomes corrupted by missing context. A sacred secret becomes political permission. The words were real, but the meaning changes because the listener is wounded, frightened, and desperate for certainty. That is how history often breaks in this world, not because nobody knows the truth, but because truth passes through people who need it to mean something else. Daemon's relationship to prophecy comes later, through vision and confrontation. For most of his life, Daemon treats power as something immediate. A crown, a dragon, a blade, a bed, a battlefield. He does not naturally think in terms of long duty to the realm, but Harrenhal forces him to see that his family's story stretches beyond his own pride. The question is whether that vision humbles him or simply gives him a grander myth to serve. That uncertainty is important. House of the Dragon does not treat prophecy as a simple answer. It treats prophecy as pressure, and pressure reveals character. The second major theme is legitimacy. Almost every conflict in the show comes back to who gets recognized as real. Rhaenyra is the named heir, but many refuse to recognize her because she is a woman. Aegon is not the named heir, but many accept him because he is male. Rhaenys had a claim, but the realm rejected her. Jacaerys and Lucerys are officially legitimate, but their appearance invites doubt. Adam and Aelin carry important blood, but not official status. Hugh and Ulf reveal that dragon blood may exist outside the polished royal family tree. Again and again, the show separates truth from recognition, and in Westeros, recognition often matters more than truth. If enough powerful people call Aegon king, he can become king even if Viserys never wanted it. If enough people refuse to say Rhaenyra's sons are illegitimate, they remain princes-in-law. If enough people whisper the truth, the legal fiction becomes unstable. If a dragon chooses a low-born rider, the old hierarchy is challenged whether nobles like it or not. This is why the war feels so inevitable. The realm has no neutral way to settle the contradiction. Law says one thing, custom says another, blood says one thing, appearance says another. Oaths say one thing, power says another. When institutions cannot resolve legitimacy, violence steps in. That is the dance of the dragons in one sentence. A civil war is not only a battle between armies, it is a battle between realities. The Greens need the realm to believe Aegon's rule is natural, stable, and lawful. The Blacks need the realm to believe Rhaenyra's claim is the true continuation of Viserys's will. Each side is not just fighting for territory. Each side is fighting to make its version of reality permanent. This is why symbols matter so much. Crowns matter, coronations matter, public funerals matter, dragon appearances matter, oaths matter, seating arrangements matter. Who stands beside whom in the throne room matters. In a modern story, these might look like formal details. In House of the Dragon, they are weapons. Aegon's coronation is not just a ceremony, it is a claim made flesh. Rhaenyra's crowning on Dragonstone is not just a family gathering, it is counter-history. Rhaenys bursting into the dragon pit is not just spectacle. It is a reminder that the green version of reality can still be challenged by fire and blood. Viserys entering the throne room to defend Lucerys is not just a dying king's effort. It is the last time royal authority briefly pushes back against the coming lie. The show understands that power is not only held, it is performed, and nobody performs power more dangerously than the Targaryens. The third major theme is gender, but the show is careful not to make it simple. Rhaenyra is blocked because she is a woman, but that does not make every choice she makes automatically wise. Alicent is trapped by patriarchy, but that does not erase the harm she helps create. Rhaenys is denied the throne, but she also makes decisions that allow the next generation's conflict to continue. Helaena is innocent in many ways, but she is still used as part of royal reproduction, symbolism, and war. The women of House of the Dragon are not all the same kind of victim. That is what makes the writing more interesting. Rhaenyra fights for a right denied to her by a male-centered order. But she also wants to inherit the same absolute monarchy that hurt so many others. Her victory would break one barrier while preserving the larger system. That tension makes her compelling. She is progressive in one context and dynastic in another. Alicent obeys the rules and discovers that obedience does not protect her. She becomes queen, mother, political actor, and moral voice, but the men around her use her when useful and sideline her when power becomes military. Her tragedy is not that she had no agency at all. Her tragedy is that the agency she did have was shaped by fear, duty, and manipulation until it became a trap. Rhaenys sees more clearly than almost anyone because she has already lost the future once. She knows what men will do to keep a woman from the throne. She knows ambition when she sees it, but wisdom does not make her omnipotent. Her restraint in the dragon pit, her support of Rhaenyra, her final ride at Rook's Rest, each choice carries dignity and consequence. Helaena is perhaps the saddest because she barely participates in the struggle for power, yet power destroys her anyway. Her prophetic sensitivity makes her seem connected to truths others cannot hear, but the court does not protect dreamers. It consumes them. And then there are the births, Aemma, Laena, Rhaenyra. These scenes are not accidental repetitions. The series keeps returning to childbirth because dynastic politics depends on bodies, especially women's bodies, while pretending succession is an abstract legal matter. The realm talks about heirs, claims, and bloodlines, but those words are built on pain, risk, and death. The war begins with a woman dying for the hope of a son. That is not background. That is the thesis. The fourth major theme is the danger of dragons themselves. In many fantasy stories, dragons are wish fulfillment. They are majestic, powerful, beautiful, and thrilling. House of the Dragon allows them to be all of that, but never lets us forget the horror. A dragon is not simply a pet or a vehicle. A dragon is a living weapon with instinct, memory, and force beyond human scale. Arax does not simply obey Luke during the chase. Vhagar does not fully obey Aemond. Vermithor does not politely accept applicants. Meleys and Rhaenys die not as decorative fantasy icons, but as combatants in a war that has become too large for human bodies. The show's best dragon scenes are frightening because they remind us that Targaryen power rests on something unstable. The family tells itself that dragons prove its superiority. But what if dragons are also the force that makes Targaryens reckless? What if every political problem looks different when your family owns living firestorms? What if the existence of dragons makes compromise feel less necessary? That is why the dance is so devastating historically. It is not just a war fought with dragons. It is a war that destroys the Dragon Age from within. Even viewers who do not know every detail of the wider lore can feel the direction. These creatures are too powerful to be used in a family dispute without changing the world forever. Every time one dragon fights another, the dynasty burns part of its own foundation. The Targaryens are not only killing relatives, they are killing the source of their own myth. This is where House of the Dragon becomes a true prequel, not just a franchise extension. A weaker prequel only explains how things got from point A to point B. This series does something better. It shows the emotional and political logic behind a world we already know. When Game of Thrones begins, dragons are gone, the Targaryens are exiled, and their former greatness exists mostly in memory, fear, and legend. House of the Dragon shows us that the fall was not sudden. It was chosen piece by people who kept telling themselves they had no choice. That is the tragedy. Almost every character can explain their own actions. Viserys can say he wanted peace. Rhaenyra can say she was defending her inheritance. Alicent can say she was protecting her children. Otto can say he was preserving stability. Daemon can say enemies only understand force. Aegon can say he was pushed into a role he did not seek. Aemond can say he was mocked, maimed, and threatened. Corlys can say he was securing his house's legacy. Rhaenys can say she had to choose the side that still honored the named heir. None of those explanations are empty, but together they still lead to catastrophe. That is what makes House of the Dragon more than a simple good versus evil story. It is about how understandable motives can create unforgivable outcomes. It is about how private pain becomes public policy. It is about how family arguments become national disasters when the family owns the state. And that brings us to the central irony of the series. The Targaryens believe they are the only house capable of protecting the realm from a future darkness. But before that darkness ever arrives, they become the danger the realm has to survive, not because they are uniquely evil, because they are uniquely powerful. Power magnifies everything. Love becomes alliance, marriage becomes strategy, children become claims, grief becomes policy, rumor becomes treason. A mistake in the sky becomes the start of a civil war. A dying man's words become permission for a coup. A mother's fear becomes a kingdom's fire. This is why House of the Dragon feels so intimate even when the scale is enormous. The battles matter, but the real explosions begin in bedrooms, sick rooms, council chambers, family dinners, funerals, and whispered conversations between parents and children. The show keeps telling us that history is not only made by grand declarations. Sometimes history turns because one father refuses to confront reality. One daughter is named heir but not fully protected. One queen hears the wrong meaning in a dying sentence. One prince chases another through a storm and loses control. One husband acts on vengeance and kills the wrong child. One dragon answers instinct instead of command. Those moments are small compared to armies, but they are where the world breaks. By the end of Season 2, the full available story of House of the Dragon has moved from succession crisis into irreversible civil war. The Greens and Blacks are no longer factions preparing for conflict. They are active war powers. The emotional bonds that might have softened the conflict are almost gone. The children have become combatants. The dragons have become battlefield forces. The small folk have started paying for royal choices. The old king's dream of unity has become a memory no one can afford. And the most painful truth is that Viserys' reign, which looked peaceful from the outside, may have been the place where the war was truly built. Peace without resolution is not peace. It is a paused explosion. Viserys paused the explosion for years. He loved his family. He loved Rhaenyra. He loved Alicent in his own limited way. He loved the idea of harmony, but he did not force the realm to accept the cost of his decision. He named a daughter heir in a kingdom that resisted female rule, then created male heirs who became rival symbols. He trusted oaths made under pressure to survive ambition after his death. He wanted everyone to stay a family. But monarchy does not let royal families be only families. That is the curse. A normal family can fight and wound each other privately. A royal family turns every wound into law, rumor, alliance, or war. A normal brother's resentment may poison a household. A royal brother's resentment can burn a castle. A normal inheritance dispute can divide relatives. A Targaryen inheritance dispute can kill dragons and reshape the realm. This is why the title matters. House of the Dragon is not called The Dance of the Dragons. Even though that is the historical event it is building, the focus is the house itself, the structure, the family, the myth, the bloodline, the beautiful, terrifying machine that produces both greatness and ruin. The dragons are not separate from the house. They are what the house believes about itself, made flesh. And once that belief turns inward, no enemy outside the family could have done more damage. House of the Dragon also works because it understands something many franchise prequels forget. The audience already knows the broad destination, so suspense cannot depend only on surprise. It has to depend on dread. We know the Targaryen dynasty will not stay whole forever. We know dragons will eventually disappear from the world. We know the Iron Throne will pass through centuries of blood before Game of Thrones begins. That means House of the Dragon cannot simply ask, "What happens next?" It has to ask a better question. Why didn't anyone stop it? That question is what gives the series its tragic force. Every season shows moments where the disaster could have changed shape. Rhaenyra and Alicent could have remained allies. Viserys could have secured the succession more aggressively. Otto could have accepted the named heir. Daemon could have restrained his worst instincts. Aemond could have let Lucerys leave Storm's End. Rhaenyra could have rejected retaliation. Aegon could have refused the crown. Alicent could have seen earlier that the men around her were using her fear as a bridge to war. But House of the Dragon is not a story where one clean decision fixes everything. By the time each character understands the danger, they are already standing inside the machine. That machine is the real villain of the show. Not one person, not one faction, not one misunderstanding. The villain is the dynastic system itself. A world where inheritance is treated like destiny, where women are measured by heirs, where men mistake violence for strength, where children are born into political roles before they can speak, and where dragons make every conflict too large to survive. This is why the show's best scenes are often not the biggest ones. Yes, the dragon battles are spectacular. Rook's rest matters, Storm's End matters, the dragon pit matters. The sight of Vhagar in the sky matters because it reminds us that this family has weapons no other house can match. But the quieter scenes are where the story becomes unforgettable. Viserys walking to the Iron Throne with half his face hidden. Alicent and Rhaenyra looking at each other across years of betrayal. Daemon sitting in Harrenhal, finally unable to outrun himself. Rhaenys watching younger players repeat the mistakes that once stole her future. Helaena speaking as if time itself is whispering through her. Jace realizing that his mother's solution may threaten his own legitimacy. Alicent understanding that the war she helped justify no longer needs her permission. Those moments are where House of the Dragon becomes more than a recap of fictional history. It becomes a study of how power changes the meaning of family. In an ordinary family, a father's favoritism can create resentment. In House Targaryen, it can create rival claims. In an ordinary family, a childhood fight can leave scars. In House Targaryen, it can lead to dragonfire above Storm's End. In an ordinary family, a misunderstanding at a deathbed might haunt the survivors. In House Targaryen, it can help crown the wrong king. That scale is the horror. The show also understands that no side can remain morally clean once the war begins. The Blacks have the stronger legal claim through Viserys' named succession. But that does not make every Black action righteous. Daemon's revenge through blood and cheese stains the cause. Rhaenyra's use of dragonseeds may be strategically necessary, but it risks turning desperate people into disposable tools. The blockade pressures King's Landing and exposes Green weakness, but ordinary people still suffer. The Greens have the weaker claim if we follow Viserys' declared will, but they are not written as cartoon villains. Alicent's fear for her children is real. Helaena's grief is real. Aegon's pain after Jacaerys' murder is real. Aemond's childhood humiliation does not excuse his later actions, but it helps explain the shape of his rage. That is why the war feels tragic instead of mechanical. The series gives every major player a human wound. Then it gives that wound access to power. Rhaenyra's wound is being chosen and still doubted. Alicent's wound is doing her duty and finding no safety in it. Daemon's wound is needing recognition from people he pretends to despise. Aemond's wound is humiliation transformed into discipline and cruelty. Aegon's wound is being unwanted until others need him as a symbol. Rhaenys' wound is the crown that passed her by. Corlys's wound is the terror that his legacy will vanish. Jace's wound is knowing that his future rests on a truth everyone is forced not to say. And Viserys's wound is the belief that love can hold together a structure built to turn love into rivalry. That last one may be the saddest. Viserys is not the most exciting character in the series, but he may be the most important. He is the king who wanted peace so badly that he confused silence with healing. He believed that if he loved Rhaenyra, protected Alicent, forgave Daemon, honored the Velaryons, and kept the court from saying forbidden truths aloud, then the family might survive. But a lie does not disappear because a king forbids people to speak it. It waits. And when Viserys dies, all the truths he suppressed come out at once. That is why his death feels like the fall of a dam. The water was always there. The pressure was always building. His body, his title, and his personal desire for unity were the last things holding it back. Once he is gone, the court does not create the crisis. It reveals it. By the current point of the series, House of the Dragon has left its opening question behind. At first, the question was whether Rhaenyra could inherit. Then the question became whether Aegon's coronation could be stopped. Then it became whether Rhaenyra could avoid full war after Luke's death. Then whether vengeance could be controlled. Then whether dragons could be used without destroying everything. Now the question is harsher. How much of House Targaryen will still exist when the war is done? That is the real hook going forward. The Dance of the Dragons is not simply about choosing a ruler. It is about watching a dynasty consume the very things that made it untouchable. Every dragon lost weakens the family. Every child killed poisons the future. Every castle burned makes the realm less willing to see Targaryens as protectors. Every act of revenge teaches the next person to answer with something worse. And the cruel irony is that both sides can still imagine victory. The Greens can imagine Aemond and Vivagar forcing the realm into submission. They can imagine Aegon's crown surviving through fear, law, and military success. They can imagine Rhaenyra's faction collapsing under internal distrust. The Blacks can imagine their new dragon riders changing the balance. They can imagine Daemon's armies, Jace's diplomacy, Corlys's fleet, and Rhaenyra's claim combining into unstoppable force. They can imagine taking King's Landing and proving that the stolen throne can be reclaimed. But the audience can see the trap. Even if one side wins, the house loses, because the dance is not just a contest for rule. It is a civil war inside the source of Targaryen power. The dragons that once made the family supreme are now being turned against each other. The bloodline that once justified rule is now spilling itself across the realm. The prophecy that was supposed to give meaning to the throne has been misunderstood, weaponized, and buried under ambition. House of the Dragon is strongest when it lets us feel that contradiction. The story is beautiful because the world is beautiful. The costumes, castles, banners, dragon designs, court rituals, and Valyrian atmosphere all make the Targaryen age feel grand and seductive. You understand why people would be drawn to this family. You understand why their myth lasted. But the story is horrifying because beauty does not make power moral. A silver-haired prince on a dragon can still be a frightened boy with a grudge. A queen with a rightful claim can still make choices that cost innocent lives. A mother protecting her children can still help start a war that destroys them. A king who loves peace can still leave behind chaos because he refused to confront conflict directly. That is the full meaning of House of the Dragon so far. It is not just the story of how Rhaenyra and Aegon became rivals. It is the story of how a ruling family convinced itself that blood, dragons, prophecy, and tradition made it exceptional, only to discover that none of those things protected it from ordinary human failure. Pride still mattered. Fear still mattered. Jealousy still mattered. Grief still mattered. Bad parenting still mattered. Political cowardice still mattered. And when those ordinary failures belonged to people with dragons, the result became history. That is why the series stays compelling even when viewers know the Targaryens are heading toward ruin. We are not watching to find out whether the family survives untouched. We are watching to understand how people who could see the fire coming still kept walking toward it. And maybe that is the final tragedy of the show's current story. The Targaryens are not blind. Many of them understand pieces of the danger. Rhaenys sees it. Rhaenyra fears it. Alicent realizes it too late. Viserys senses it but cannot act strongly enough. Daemon confronts it through visions. Jace calculates it. Even Aemond, in his own cold way, understands the scale of dragon power. But understanding danger is not the same as escaping it. By the end of the available story, House of the Dragon has become a slow-motion collapse where every character still thinks one more bold move might secure the future. One more alliance, one more dragon, one more execution, one more battle, one more sacrifice. That is how dynasties fall. Not always in one foolish decision. Sometimes they fall through 100 decisions that each felt necessary at the time. And that is why House of the Dragon is not simply a prequel to Game of Thrones. It is the missing wound underneath the world of Westeros. It shows us that the fall of dragons was not caused by some outside enemy strong enough to defeat them. It was caused by the family that had them, turning fire inward until the sky itself became a battlefield. If you want more full series breakdowns in this style, stay with Series Span Cinema. Because the dance has only begun, and the most devastating truth of House Targaryen is still ahead. When a family believes it was born to rule the world, it may destroy the world before admitting it cannot rule itself.